All right, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from across the continent. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and I know we've got a lot of new faces in the crowd today. So, if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And truly, today in North America, we've got Florida to Washington State, we've got British Columbia to Nova Scotia. So, we are coast to coast in both countries. A big welcome to all our amazing classes as we continue to showcase the coolest people and places on planet Earth. Now, everything we do goes to YouTube. So if you want to see this program in 3 weeks or 3 years or share with your family and friends, it's right there. Lots of opportunity to keep the learning going. And I want to note today, too, we will have a Kahoot. So between our talk and our Q&A, 4 quick questions, test your understanding, have a little bit of fun. If you want to pull up kahoot.it with that game pin in a separate tab, feel free to do that now. Feel free to do it in 20 minutes. I will share that again in a little bit. Now, last year, we were thrilled to partner with Karen Romano-Young. She is the amazing visionary behind I Was a Kid. It is a really cool online campaign, website, all sorts of amazing art, showcasing some really cool people in really diverse careers. I know when you're in grade 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever, it can be hard to figure out what you might want to do when you're older. And so Karen's vision was to showcase these careers and people as full people. If you're a scientist, you're not just a scientist. You can be a dancer, you can be an artist, you can be any number of things. And she showcased some really, really fantastic individuals last year. So we partnered with her to bring on like 5 amazing broadcasts. And we're starting that series again today with Sabrina Heiser. She is joining us in Texas, and she's going to talk today about diving into the forests of our oceans, one of the coolest kind of habitats on planet Earth, her really diverse career, and more. So I'm going to stop talking. It's not about me. I'm going to turn you over to Sabrina to blow your mind with her amazing career. And without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Sabrina.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here today and talk a little bit about who I am and what I do. So currently, I'm a postdoctoral researcher in Dina Oertner's lab at the University of Texas at Austin Marine Science Institute. And a postdoc means that I finished my PhD, so I've earned my doctor, but I'm not a professor yet. So that means I get to do so much exciting science. I get to learn a lot of new skills and discover more of our planet. But before I dive into the actual science that I've been doing, I wanted to talk a little bit about more about who I am as a person, apart from being a marine biologist and a scientist. I'm German, so if you hear a funny accent, that's why. I was born in Germany and I grew up there, so English is my second language. I'm a daughter to my parents, and I'm also a sister. So I have a little brother, 4 years younger than me, and I love him very much. But as of all of you know who've got siblings, we also fight a lot sometimes. I'm a swimmer, so I love being in the water, whether it's jumping into the ocean or going for a swim in the pool. I'm also a little bit of a dancer. I'm not sure I'm that good at it, but I just like doing it, so I do it. Throughout growing up, I did ballet and I did hip hop and things like that. I also learned how to play the flute, so I just enjoy doing things with music. I'm also a scuba diver, so I was very lucky. Both of my parents were scuba divers. They actually met through scuba diving. And that meant that the first time I scuba dived was when I was 8 years old, which you can see on the picture here. My dad took me scuba diving in Norway. So not the warmest water either, but that's probably where I discovered my love for the ocean and anything that's living inside the ocean. I'm also a little bit of a crafter, maybe even you would call an artist. I love doing things with my hands and being crafty. On the left, you can see some jewelry that I made where I put seaweed inside resin. So I like using what I work with and make art with it. I like quilting, I like crocheting and cross-stitching and knitting and all those kinds of things in my free time. And then I'm also a little bit of a world traveler. I love going and exploring different places, whether it's on vacation or for work. I've lived in a number of different places. So as I already mentioned, I grew up in Germany, and then I moved to England in the UK, where I did my undergraduate degree. So that's where I went to college. And then after that, I worked for a little bit, and that's where I lived in Antarctica for 2.5 years. And after that, I moved to the States, to America, where I first lived in Alabama, where I got my PhD, and now I live in Texas. But let's get back to the science. As a marine biologist, I get to combine all of these things that I am into what I do every day. And I do this by studying algae. And I know all of you are out there in your classrooms, so I just want you to shout out what you think algae are and how you would define them. I'll just give you all a minute.
I can actually bring them in, Sabrina, if we want to see what they say for algae.
Yeah, go for it.
Mr. Shattuck, Deep River, what do you guys think? Algae. Does anything come to mind?
Yell it. What do you think algae is? Yell it out.
Organisms. Small little
Small seaweed organisms, amazing. Miss Bauer's class, I'm going to come to you guys too. What do you think? Grade 5, 6s. Seaweed, grass. Sabrina, they're killing it. I don't even, this is amazing.
I know. I think my talk is over. You already know everything. Yeah, that was really great. So algae, as you said, are aquatic plants. So they are plants that grow in the water and they need water, whether it's fresh water or salt water. And there are two main types of algae. And you already mentioned one of them, and that's the macroscopic algae. So the big ones are the ones that we call seaweed, right? So there are three main types. There are red ones, brown ones, and green ones. So you can tell as scientists, we are very inventive with our names. We just call them by what they look like. And that is because they produce slightly different pigments. The other main type of algae are microscopic algae. So those are the ones, as the name suggests, where you need a microscope to look at them because they're so tiny. But sometimes you might see a pond or a lake or the ocean turn a different color, like green, for example. And that's because those microscopic algae are so abundant that they color the water. Or if you have an aquarium tank at home, you might sometimes see green on the inside of the glass, right? And that is because those microscopic algae are growing on there and they're covering it. So you probably clean it off so that you can see the fish. So that's what algae are. So why do I study algae? What makes them so exciting? There are three main things which I think make them pretty important. The first thing is that they produce oxygen. I'll turn it back over to all of you. How much of our oxygen that we need to survive do you think is being produced by the algae?
Ooh, all right. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. What do you think, Mr. Oh, they all are running to the camera. Mr. Shattuck.
70%. A lot.
I like that we had 70% and then instantly followed by a lot. That was amazing. Ms. Bauer's class, what do you think?
40%.
40%. Okay. I like these answers. Guys, YouTubers, feel free to chime in too, even if you're adults, even if you're Sabrina's mom, like whatever you want to do. We'd love to have you answer. But yeah, 70%, 40%, nice little mix in the middle. Those are really high from what I would have guessed when I was your age. That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Shall I give the answer now?
Drum roll, please. Yes, let's do it.
All right. So those of you who guessed 70%, you were really close. So our macroalgae produce 30%. So that's close to the 40% you were guessing. And then our microalgae make over 50%. So in total, algae are producing 80% of our oxygen. So that makes them even more important than our land plants that you can see here. The other thing is they provide a lot of food. So just like we're eating vegetables and fruits, anything that's in the water will eat algae, right? And then they also provide a lot of living space. Just like a tree where we might find squirrels and birds and a lot of insects, organisms in the ocean will use the seaweeds to live in. So why do I study algae? Because they're really important for us, but also for everything else and for the health of the ecosystem. So where have I studied algae? Well, if you paid attention earlier, you will already probably be guessing now that I've been studying algae when I was in the United Kingdom or in England, where I did my undergraduate degree. I worked with macroalgae there, so the seaweeds. And right now I'm based in Texas, but the samples that I'm working with actually come from Florida and from the US Virgin Islands, so pretty warm regions. And right now I'm actually working with microalgae, so with the tiny microscopic ones. And then in between those two, when I did my PhD, I worked in Antarctica. So on a map that's on the bottom of the map, and that's where we find the penguins. And I put that there because they're my favorite type of organism. Now, usually when you look at a map, Antarctica is often left off, or it's just this little sliver on the bottom. But when you actually rotate the globe and look directly at Antarctica from the bottom, it looks a little bit more like this. So what I want you all to do who are watching me right now is put your right hand up in front of me, in front of you, like I'm doing right now. And if you put your thumb up, this is roughly the shape of Antarctica. And the thumb is what we call the Antarctic Peninsula. And where your thumbnail starts, that is where the US Palmer Station is located. So this is where I was based studying seaweeds in Antarctica. That is one of the American Antarctic research stations. And the Antarctic Peninsula is just south of South America. So how do we get there? We fly to South America, we fly to Chile, to the tip of Chile down there in Punta Arenas, and then we get aboard one of the American research vessels. And then it takes us about 5 to 7 days to sail down to Palmer Station on the Antarctic Peninsula. The first part is going through this part of the ocean, or the first part of the trip, which is where it can be very bad weather. So sometimes we get very big waves, some people get seasick, and what you can see here is the waves crashing over the back of the ship. Don't worry, we didn't actually flood or anything. The water just drained off again, so we didn't get any water into the ship. But I thought it's pretty cool to see what it's like. And then as we get closer and closer to the peninsula, we get more and more sheltered, it calms down, and we finally start seeing the icebergs, which is always really majestical. Some of those are bigger than the ship that we're on. And then eventually we make it to Palmer Station. This is the first view that we get of Palmer Station when we come alongside. You can see the people here already waiting for us. They're ready to throw the lines over. They're excited for new people to come and join, but they're also excited because we bring fresh food. I want to point out in the main building here, these windows, they're actually where our dining room is. So we have a really nice view when we would go for our meals. Up here in the back is where my room was, so that's where I stayed. And then the bottom of this building is where our labs were located. So that's where we brought the samples to and did a lot of the science. Before I dive more into what we actually did, I want to introduce you to the team that is at Palmer Station. We're about 40 people in the summer at Palmer Station, and there's not just scientists, there's a lot of people who keep the station running and make sure that the science can happen. So that also means if you want to go to Antarctica, you do not have to be a scientist to go there. So keep that in mind. So just to introduce the type of people who are there, we had Chris. He was looking after the recycling and doing a lot of little jobs around station. So he was a really important person. We tried to recycle everything down there that we can. We had Hannah. She was our lab manager. We also had a lab technician, and they all looked after all of the science teams, made sure we had all the instruments and equipment that we needed to run our science and our experiments. This was our communications team. Mike up here, he was in charge of making sure that we could talk to each other so that we could use our walkie-talkies when we are out on the boat, but also that we could talk to our families back at home and, of course, other scientists. So he made it possible that I was able to call my family in Germany and talk to them and tell them all about my experience. And then here, these are our IT people. So any computer problems, internet problems, they're your people to help. We had a doctor on station. He was looking after us if we got sick or injured. Luckily, fingers crossed, most of the time he didn't have that much to do. So he went and helped out with other things around the station. Sometimes he even came out on the boat with us when we went scuba diving. We also had electricians and mechanics and plumbers and carpenters who repaired things around station or made sure they didn't break in the first place. And they also helped us if there was something that we needed to build for our experiments, because down there we did not have any stores. So we couldn't just easily go and buy something, which is where my crafting comes in, and it's really good fun to build different things and have people to help you and show you how to do it. We had a station manager. He made sure we were all safe and that things were running smoothly. And now I'm going to introduce you to probably two of the most important people on base, and that was our chefs. They made really tasty food, which keeps morale up. We all sit together and eat together our meals, especially lunch and dinner, and they just made absolutely amazing food. And then, of course, we had our science teams. So these were the two teams that I was down there with in the 2 field seasons. We had our professors who came with us, and then some of the other students. The other person I wanted to point out is Keith over here. He came down with us for our 2nd field season, and he was actually a school teacher and part of the Polar Track program. And he came down with us to experience firsthand what it's like to do science in the field, and then he brought that experience back to the students in the classroom. And it was really good fun having him around. The last person that I wanted to introduce that Jessie already mentioned earlier is Karen Romano-Young, who I met down there. She is an artist and she made these amazing Antarctic log comics. If you go to her webpage, you can find comics about all the different science that was going on down there, but also about some of the other people who were down there. And then she's also currently doing the I Was a Kid series that Jessie already mentioned earlier. So I would highly encourage you to check her out. All right, let's get back to the science. Here's another question for all of you out there. I want to know what you think of when you hear Antarctica.
Ooh, okay. Kids, come on up. So Miss Bauer, I'm going to head to you guys first. YouTubers, if you want to chime in as well. 5, 6s. What do you think of when you think of Antarctica?
Polar bears.
Snow, cold, polar bears. Interesting. Mr. Shaddis class?
Beautiful animals.
-70. Ooh, you guys are amazing. I love you guys as an audience. You're so great. Sabrina, tell us more and maybe highlight polar bears as maybe not being down there too.
Yeah, right. So a lot of the things that you mentioned, I think of as well. And those are the things that you see, especially when you arrive on the ship. There's snow, there's ice, lots of white and gray and blue colors. There's a lot of seals. They are a lot of fun to see. The whales are there, especially during the summer, because there's a lot of food for them, and it's really cool to see those. And then there's the penguins. As I mentioned earlier, those are my favorite animals. So the penguins are the ones that we find in Antarctica, and the polar bears are the ones on the other pole. So those are the ones that we find in the Arctic. So that is probably the first take-home message from today's talk. So all of this is not that colorful, right? A lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of white and gray and blue. However, when you dive into the ocean, it becomes much more colorful. I still remember my first dive when I just jumped into the water, and there were so many colors. And I was so surprised by that. Even as a scientist, I didn't expect that. And that is because we have these underwater seaweed forests in Antarctica, especially around Palmer Station. And even when the seaweeds go away, we still have a lot of other colorful things that grow and live there. So we just talked about this. Do you all remember from earlier why algae are so important? There were 3 things.
Ooh, all right. What do we think? Miss Bauer's class, reasons that they're important.
Why is it important?
Oxygen.
Food.
Yeah.
And Mr. Shattuck, I'm going to come to you. One more.
Produce a lot of oxygen.
Yeah, we got that. We got food. Is there another one that you remember?
No.
No. That's
remember the insects and the birds.
Things. Oh, habitat. Yes, we've got that. Places for things to live. Very good.
Perfect. Those were exactly the 3 things why they are so important. And let me tell you a little bit more about how they are important in Antarctica. In terms of living space, there are a lot of little snails in the seaweed, but even more common are these little tiny organisms called amphipods. And amphipods are very similar if you've heard of shrimp or krill before. If you've watched Happy Feet 2, there's a lot of krill in there. Or I think there is also a shrimp or something similar in the Finding Nemo movie in the fish tank. But they're very similar organisms. They're tiny, so they're about the size of the nail on my pinky. And they're really abundant. So in about 1 meter squared, which is when I stretch out my arms and do this, that's about the surface area of the bottom that I'm covering. There's about 10,000 and sometimes even 100,000 of those amphipods within just that little bit of area. And there are so many that when I dive into the water and get down into the seaweed forest, I sometimes see them zooming around, which is really cool. And then, of course, the seaweeds, as we mentioned, are also a good food source. And they often get eaten. But that's not always the case. And there are 2 main reasons why a seaweed might not get eaten. The first one is that the flesh of the seaweed is just simply too tough, right? So I don't like to eat tree bark or wood because it's far too hard to chew. And some of those seaweeds are too hard to eat for the herbivores that live in them, for the things that would eat them otherwise. The other reason might be that they're producing chemical defenses, and that's what I study. So chemical defenses might be poisons or toxins that they are making. So there are some plants that we can't eat because they would make us sick. And similarly, the seaweeds produce some chemicals that would make the things that eat them sick. And that's because the seaweeds don't want to get eaten, so they produce defenses. So either they can make the organism sick, or it means they just taste bad. I'm sure all of you, or some of you, or all of you know someone who doesn't like to eat Brussels sprouts, right? And that is because the Brussels sprouts, they don't make us sick, but they taste bitter to some people. So some people can taste those chemicals that the Brussels sprouts are making. I personally love Brussels sprouts, but I know my brother absolutely hates them. So the seaweed that I'm studying is called Pleucamium. And Pleucamium is probably the biggest Brussels sprout out there. And that is because almost nothing, except with one little exception, nothing will eat it. So it produces so many chemical defenses that it's well protected against anything that would eat it up. And that is probably why it's so incredibly common in Antarctica. And even though nothing really eats it, lots of little amphipods live in Pleucamium. And that is because the fish predator that likes to eat the amphipods doesn't like to eat Pleucamium either. So if it was to try to get some amphipods and take a big bite out of the Pleucamium, it just spits it back out because it doesn't want the Pleucamium. It's like mixing, if you don't like Brussels sprouts and mixing it in with something really tasty, you still don't like Brussels sprouts, right? So the amphipods hide in the Pleucamium in order to get protection from these predators. And that makes Pleucamium really, really important to the amphipods and to the ecosystem down there, which is the reason why I study it. And when we looked further into it, we found that different Pleucamium were producing different chemicals. So we discovered this diversity in the chemical defenses. And I know I color-coded this here, but unfortunately, they don't actually look different in nature, which makes the whole sampling a little bit tricky. But I'm color-coding it here just to visualize the diversity that we find down there. And the other thing that we noticed was that certain chemical defenses were found in certain locations, or in specific locations. So they seem to be sort of a geographic distribution of those chemical defenses. And we were wondering why. What is causing this? And in general, there are 2 sort of main drivers or main reasons why individuals might differ from each other, right? So the first reason might be that there are underlying genetics. So whether you have green eyes or brown eyes or blue eyes depends on what genes you got from your parents and what eye color they had, right? So that is driving, that might be driving why they're producing certain chemical defenses. The other reason might be the environment. So they might be adapting to where they are growing. There might be something that's influencing it. So As an example, when it's cold outside, you're adapting by putting on a warm hat and warm gloves and things like that. Whereas when it's warm outside, you put on your shorts and your sunglasses and get ready for the warm water. Well, if you're going swimming, for the warm water as well. So these are the two main drivers that might be affecting what chemical defenses Placamium is producing. Underlying genetics, so the chemicals the parents made, or the environment, and so it might be adapting to the environment. And in order to investigate this question, we jumped into the water. So we got ready for scuba diving. This is what we look like just before going in. And as you can see here, we're having a lot of fun. And we collected Placamium from the different locations where they are producing different chemicals. And then we just transplanted them between those locations. And that's what's called a transplant experiment. And that was because we wanted to see whether they were changing the chemicals that they are making depending on where they are growing. We used these concrete blocks, so we attached them to ropes and then put them on the concrete blocks in order to transplant them and secure them to the bottom. And then we put them out there and then we left for a year, which was very scary for me because if you've ever lost something in the ocean or in a lake, you know how difficult it is to find it again, right? But we came back 1 year later, we found them all again. And not just that, you can see there's more Placamium than there was before. So they had grown, which was great. I know it doesn't look like that much, but for Placamium and for Antarctica, this is a lot. And what we found when we analyzed the samples was that they didn't change the chemicals they are producing. So that means the genetics are driving what chemicals they are making instead of them adapting to the environment that they are growing in. And that brings me to the end of today. I want to give you a couple of take-home messages that you can take back and tell your family and friends about. I want you all to remember that algae produce about 80% of our oxygen, so they are really important and we need to care about them. I want you to take away that they are forests in Antarctica. They're just seaweed forests that are in the ocean. That algae are important for the ecosystem by providing home and sometimes food, unless it's the Brussels sprout that no one likes to eat. And that we have my favorite seaweed, this red one over here that's very pretty, which is called Placamium, and that produces many, many chemical defenses. And with that, I think I'm turning it back over. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. That was fantastic. And if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, feel free to do that. We're going to dive in with our Kahoot to test some understanding, maybe feature some of those take-home messages, and then we're going to dive in with Q&A. If you're on YouTube, start sharing in the chat now. Mr. Shattuck, I know you need to go soon, so if you want to share in the chat as well, and Ms. Bauer, I'll be coming to you guys repeatedly for our Kahoot, or after our Kahoot for questions, so stay tuned for lots of that. Let me bring up our Kahoot quiz together. For anyone who's new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get, and what you win is Sabrina and I's everlasting respect. We don't have any gifts for you, but that respect is worth a lot. It's pretty fun to get. So we're going to dive in a sec and get underway. And thank you all so much for being so attentive and awesome in those interactive bits. You guys rock. Let's get started together. Here we go. And Sabrina, if you want to give us hints for any of these questions as we get to the final few seconds of each of them, you are welcome to subtly guide us in a direction if you'd like. All right. Number one. Algae collectively produce how much of the world's oxygen? We harped on this a whole bunch. Is it 5%, 25%, 50%, or 80%? I want all of you to get this right. You can do it. And if you don't get it right, that's fine. Play along, have some fun, yell it out in your class, however you want to take part. 5 more seconds. It's very high. And most of you got this. It is 80% of the world's oxygen is not from trees. It's from algae in the ocean, which is wild. Very, very cool. All right, Sabrina, where does that put our leaderboard? Red Jaguar takes our lead over Balanced Dove, going into number 2. Okay, kelp is an algae. How big can it grow? We didn't specifically cover this, but it fits with the theme of how I like to do questions. Can kelp get to be 10 feet tall, 50 feet tall, 100 feet, or over 150 feet? Forest of the oceans, big tree. Let's put it this way. Kelp is comparable to very, very large trees. So maybe we've stuck with a theme here Yes. Oh, very even split. No, kelp is huge. Kelp can be gigantic and grow. Sabrina, you would know this. Like it's over a foot a day. Kelp can grow.
Yeah,
And,
it can grow really, really fast.
so
But
imagine, like you kids, it grow your height in like 4 days or less. That's ridiculous. All right. I think that's going to mess with our leaderboard quite a bit. It does. Yellow Mouse takes the lead. Okay. Question 3. This is back at the beginning. So there's going to be more than one answer. What are some places Sabrina has worked? Might be all of them, might be 2 of them. Is it Antarctica, the UK, Virgin Islands, Florida? I got a hint for you. Again, when I do things, it's quite often a lot. Maybe all. Just saying. Get him in, get him in. All right. Dun, dun, dun. And I hope you all get Antarctica. That should be essential to our
right,
thing.
where the penguins are.
Yes. Oh, we forgot to note that. Polar bears are only in the Arctic. Penguins are south. Polar bears are north. They never meet. Arctic literally means bear. Antarctic means no bear. It's an easy way to remember it. All right. For this final question, I always like to harp this anytime we've got a scuba diver on, and I felt the need to put it in a Kahoot today. How old do you have to be a scuba diver like Sabrina? Is it 30, 25, 10, or 20? And actually, you highlighted something that's even a little different than my correct answer here. And there's a reason for that. And that was, I was going to pick one of the 2. All right. How old do you have to be? Do you have to be like our age, a little bit younger, or like your age? And the answer is your age. Like at 10, you can be an open water diver. At 8, you can start on the path of Bubble Maker, which is a PADI program. So you can literally get to do these amazing things at your age in grade 5, 6 classes, which is ridiculous. And you should go immediately and go do it. So let's see where our leaderboard is. Mr. Shattuck, thank you for the great questions in the chat. Miss Bauer, I will come to you guys live. And then YouTubers, chime in. Red Jaguar comes back for second. And first, drum roll, is Balanced Dove. Way to go, everybody. If you are any of these folks, let us know who you are in the chat. Mr. Shattuck, I'm going to say a quick hi to you guys and farewell. Thank you so much for playing along. And you can catch the answers to these questions later, because I'm going to start with one of your ones shared in the chat, and then Miss Bauer, I'm coming to you folks in Alberta. So Alex wants to know, and Mr. Shattuck's thoughts, what's the rarest kind of seaweed that you found?
Ooh, what's the rarest kind? So I can talk about the rarest one I found in Antarctica. I mean, I didn't find it, but I saw it there. And that's green seaweed. So for some reason, green seaweed. So remember, there's red, brown, and green seaweeds, right? And for some reason, the green seaweeds aren't as common in Antarctica and as abundant. But I saw the one that we have in the area that I went diving in, and that was really cool to find that.
Very cool. Thank you for that, Sabrina. All right, Miss Bauer's thoughts. We're heading across the country from Ontario to Alberta. Come on in, grade 5, 6s. Hi, guys. Hello. Do we have any questions for Sabrina about any of her work? Anything?
Question? Angus?
How long have you been a scuba diver?
How long have you been scuba diving?
Oh, how long have I been scuba diving? Probably for about 25 years now. So I started when I was really young, and I have just over 600 dives now.
Wow, I've got 5 dives, so I have a lot of catching up to do to get to you, okay? But it's very fun. Start anytime, kids. If you can start now, the younger you are, the more adventures you get. You can end up with 600 dives in places like Antarctica, which is pretty awesome. Sabrina, you spend so much time in your program talking about your team, and I think this is a really important thing that I always like to harp on in science programs. Where are these people coming from? Is it all like one set place? Is it people from all over the world? Antarctica is a really unique place in this regard. So if you can speak to what the science is like down there and how the bases operate and all that good stuff, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the team that I'm down there with, right? So they're mostly people who are from the same university and from other labs. So we were working with labs in Florida, for example, and so people from different places in the US. Especially when I was at Rothera, so that's the British station where I lived for 2.5 years before I started my PhD, we had scientists from different countries. So we had a lab there from the Netherlands, and they were building their research program on the British station. So there's a lot of collaboration. There are people from Australia, from New Zealand, and lots of people from the UK, obviously on the British station. But yeah, we get people from everywhere, and that it's also what makes it really exciting, because you get to know so many different people, and then also all the different science they were doing. So some people in Antarctica were also working on the microalgae and not just the seaweeds, and on penguins and birds and seals and whales, everything.
One thing I love about the camaraderie down there is that literally every time we have a program where someone's been to Antarctica or talking about it, we have people in the chat saying things like this, where they're coming in and talking about working with you. So Novia, welcome in. You mentioned Hugh Griffiths, who we've had on many times, said hello today. So it's an amazing place in the world, because it's an entire continent dedicated to science and collaboration. Where there's issues elsewhere in the world, people go to Antarctica and work together in a positive way for the benefit of mankind, which is it makes it quite special.
Yeah, and I want to say, Z is an awesome example. That the message that you just showed, she is actually a woman who is working in the trades. So you can become a mechanic or a plumber or an electrician if you're a woman too, even if you don't see as many out there right now. But and she is an amazing role model too.
Yeah. I love when we highlight this, because I think a lot of students, certainly when I was a kid, I assumed you had to be like a PhD, an epic researcher to go down there. And there's cooks, there's base managers, there's post office managers. Like, no matter what you're interested in, if you want to end up on a sea expedition or at NASA or doing stuff in Antarctica, you have that capacity. So just apply, get involved, meet people that know what the whole shtick is all about, and you'd be amazed the sort of adventures you can have. So thank you very much for sharing that, Sabrina. All right, one more from our Mr. Shadid's class crew online, and then coming back to Ms. Bauer. Asher wanted to know, does Plocanium only live in Antarctica, or is it all over the place?
So there are different Plocanium in different places. They are not exactly the same species, but they are very, very closely related. They look very similar, so you can find them in different places too. And they also produce a lot of chemical defenses. So they're really interesting. You can study them in warmer water if that's more what you like to do.
I love getting to talk to scientists in this role, because you're like grinning ear to ear as you're talking about the chemical defenses, and like getting to nerd out is just the biggest joy of this job. So thank you. Kids, if you're fascinated in anything, it could be art, music, sports, whatever, as much as Sabrina is about chemical defenses and Plocanium, you're golden. Like, just stick with that, whatever you're doing. Ms. Bauer's class, I'm heading back to Alberta. Come on in if you've got another question. And then we've got time for like one more. Time flies and you're having fun, folks. So come on in, 5-6s. Hey.
Next question. Group.
What's your favorite algae grow in like pools and ponds?
Can algae grow in pools and ponds?
Ooh.
Can algae grow in pools and ponds? Yes, definitely. I think anywhere where there's water, they can grow. So you might sometimes see there's bigger algae and smaller algae growing in ponds. If you don't take care of your pool, if you have a pool, if you don't take care of it, the algae can take over. Yeah.
I had a pool when I was growing up, and my sole mission in life was to stop the algae from going in my pool. And I lost that battle relentlessly. I was terrible at it. Life will find a way, as we learned from Jurassic Park.
So you just learned they produce a lot of oxygen. So
I did. So you know what? The pool was green. I swam in it. It was fine. We were making oxygen. That was my contribution to the world's health and happiness. Sabrina, as I said, we've got time for one more question. So I want to wrap up with just for anyone who wants to go to Antarctica, is there, whether as a tourist, whether as a worker, is there anything that you would recommend most that sort of helped your career as you sort of set the stage for yourself to go there?
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether you go just in general, pack warm clothes. That's probably a big one. And other than that, just go and get the opportunities that you're interested in. I personally learned about working in Antarctica from another student who had already graduated, where I did my undergraduate degree, and she came in and gave a presentation about the work she was doing and who she was working for. And after her talk, I was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. I was so excited about it. And then I applied for the job. The first time I applied, I didn't get it. So I went back and applied for a second time, and then I got the job. So stick with it, even if it doesn't always work out the first time around. And I still remember arriving the first time, and I was like, surely this is a dream, and I'm gonna wake up in a minute.
It's the place in the world that we've been lucky to feature people from every continent, I think 100 countries at this point. When people go to Antarctica, it sticks with them. It is really a profound, incredible experience. I hope everyone gets the chance in their lives to go there. You can now as tourists, which is quite amazing, the scale of operations down there. So Sabrina, this has been so much fun. One of my favorite first-timer talks we've ever had on. I want to note you've got a special shout out in the chat. So Jan, just wanted you to know, best sister in the world. Yes, this is like the most friendly, wholesome YouTube chat we've ever had. So a big thank you to everyone tuning in there. And Sabrina, what we do to wrap up every broadcast is I'm going to bring in Ms. Bauer's class to say a big thank you and farewell. Mr. Shadow's class had to dip off a little early, but thank you so much in Alberta, folks. Have a wonderful day. And bye for now, guys. We'll see you all soon.